going on, everybody, on this beautiful Saturday morning? It is your boy, the Point Guard Podcast, in the absolute college football GOAT. Gunzpicks is joining you once again for the college football preview show, sponsored by Viva Tequila Seltzers. You want to go check them out? 4.5 ABV, 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and a delicious drink altogether for your summer vacation needs. Go check them out on at vivaseltzer.com. But I am joined with me here to break down the Pac-12, the man, the myth, the legend. You've seen him everywhere from Sports Grid to VSiN Live. You might have heard him on ESPN Radio as well. The man, the myth, the legend. I hung out with him last March, and I'm telling you, great motherfucking dude. It is Mark Zeno. What's going on, my friend? How you been?
Guns, great to be with you. Football is almost here, so we are excited. Yeah, March was a show. We try not to relive that. There were some moments of pain, not from a gambling standpoint, but just from like living and being alive. So
Yes,
we'll stay focused here on football in the Pac-12.
I think we both looked at each other as like, can we even do this anymore? As like,
No,
should we just stop damaging our insides? And yeah, it was a crazy time, but it was a profitable time to say the least. And for everybody that's joining us right now, please like and subscribe to the Sports Wagering Network channel. And we're gonna start this off with some bad teams. We're gonna move our way up. If you've been watching all the other shows for the conference, we give future picks along the way, and we will recap them at the end of the show. But we're going to start this off with a team that is on a full rebuild here, folks. New coach, new system, new everything for the Stanford Cardinals. They were 3-9 last season, 1-8 in the conference. Only 6 starters back, 3 on the offense, 3 on the defense side. Troy Taylor takes over, former head coach at Sacramento State. 17 toughest schedule. Over and under is probably the lowest I've seen in P5 so far in this analysis. 2.5 wins for the Stanford Cardinals. I'll pass it to you, Mark. Do you think they can get over, or what are your thoughts on Stanford?
No, I mean, it's a full-on rebuild, right? You got a brand new head coach, new quarterback. I mean, the whole entire thing. Look, they weren't very good last year. So that's when they had, I think, 13 returning starters overall, and they just, they couldn't put it together. Their schedule is, all things considered, it's fairly easy, right? I mean, you're playing Hawaii, you get Sacramento State. They have a coin flip game. And I know people are going to think this is nuts, but a coin flip game against Colorado, because I don't think Colorado is going to be as good as people think it is. So there are 3 winnable games there. Unfortunately, they don't get Arizona State. That might have been another winnable game. Is Cal a winnable game? Maybe. It's tough. You kind of just have to see how pieces come together. This is going to be a pass for me as far as like a win total for the season, just because you're in such rebuild mode here. Guns, you don't really know how things are going to go and how they are going to be effective. Their schedule is a lot easier this year, but still, Troy Taylor's going to have his hands full with putting this program back together. They tried to make it easier to get transfers in. Still not working. So they do have 5 Pac-12 home games this year, which would play into their advantage normally. But yeah, it's very, very tough until you start to see any measure of what this offense and team is going to look like.
Yeah, I think a lot of these teams we're going to talk about, especially the early on teams, I mean, they're in full rebuild mode. You got a lot of first-year coaches really trying to bring their systems in here. But like Tanner McKee, they only won 3 games with him last season. And he was the heartbeat of that offense. He's gone. So they're basically going to have to compete for the job with a bunch of, freshmen, sophomores on this one. Who knows who's going to be the starter out of that one? Positive note, top 4 rushers are going to be back for Stanford on this one. But the wide receivers are completely depleted and inexperienced. Plus, their offensive line is completely brand new. Inexperienced unit altogether. On the defensive side, this is a defense that gave up. Their problem was they gave up a lot on the ground. 6.1 yards per carry last season, only 23 sacks. They lose their best pass rusher, but they have 4 D linemen with starting experience, so there should be an improvement there as far as stopping the run. And then the weak part, I think, on this one is their D-backs, all new starters in the secondary. Biggest question mark on that defense. But you have a new head coach. Positive note on this one, Sacramento State. He knows how to rebuild teams. When he was at Sacramento State, 2-8 when he jumped into the team. Then they went 9-4, 9-3, and 12-1 in 3 seasons there. But they have a tough schedule. They got to go to at USC, at Washington State, at Oregon State. But like you said, a lot of the tougher teams they get at home, like Oregon, UCLA, Washington, and Notre Dame towards the end of the season. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time on this one. The way the mentality of which Stanford is going to be, you're going to look at that Sacramento State offense, and then you're probably going to see something a little bit more transparent to or comparative to Wisconsin type defense as the linebacker coach takes over.
Yeah.
You see there.
Sacramento State was a big run team, so they'll try to continue that. But as you mentioned, with the offensive line, if that doesn't come together and they can't run, they're constantly going to find themselves behind the sticks in the third and long situations here. I would expect this to be one of the lower scoring teams in the Pac-12 this year, just because of the style of play and the way that they want to execute things. And this is a team where you probably can look to a lot of unders in the games that they're in, like with the exception of somebody they're playing scoring 50 points on their own.
Right.
And if their defense is any measure of consistent, and like you talked about, their defensive backfield isn't great. But Troy Taylor comes from comes from this conference. He was a record-setting quarterback at Cal, so maybe he understands it. The hardest part here is, Guns, that you're kind of transitioning from a legacy coach in David Shaw, right? And so there's so much that's going to be new in this first year with Troy Taylor.
Yeah, it's a good point there. And then, of course, the transition and a lot of these coaches, we're going to talk about one in particular that, is polarizing. FCS to FBS transition is a little bit different than, the competition wise. So
there is polarizing. I hadn't heard that.
I well, we'll talk about him. I think it's going to be the next game on this one, but 2.5 wins. That's a telling line right there. I don't think you're going to see much out of the Stanford Cardinals, at least this season, but we'll see if they improve going into 2024. Now we're going to get into the polarizing. Speaking of polarizing on this one, Deion Sanders takes over. He basically just steps in first meeting and says, I'm going to bring in my guys. If you want to transfer, get the hell out. Crazy strategy there. But this team was 1-11 last year. Can't get any worse on this one. 1-8 in the conference. 9 starters come back. 6 on the offense, 3 on the defensive side. Boulder, Colorado is the spot. 23rd toughest schedule, over and under on their total wins on this one, 3.5. I'll pass it to you, Mark. What do you think of the Buffaloes?
Under.
Yeah.
Listen, you can sit here and scream and yell, and this isn't a shot at Deion by any stretch of the imagination as a coach. You can sit here and scream and yell all you want. That's fine. But the fact of the matter is that the cupboard is bare. And you're starting everybody all over from the beginning. I'm not saying he can't turn the program around in a year or two, but the idea that this team would win 6 games this year and get to a bowl game, it's ludicrous. I just don't see how it happens unless his son is the next reincarnation of Tim Tebow in his junior year at Florida. I don't know how all of a sudden this team comes out and wins games at the rate that they do. You have to just look at this thing comparatively to where they were last year, right? And where they are this year. Because I think that is what you're asking them to do. If you're asking them to jump from offense, this is an offense last year that only averaged 281 yards per game. If you give them, let's just call it on the high side, a 60% bump in offense just from yards per game, if we just use that as a simple measure, right? And you get them to 350 yards a game. You know where that puts them? Still dead last in the conference. How much can you improve percentage-wise and still not, advance up the ranks within the conference? That's the problem. And this is why it's hard for me to back them. I'm not saying sitting here, Guns, telling you it's impossible. They were so far below everybody else. And you have so many new things. And a lot of these transfers, they're FCS kids. They're not they're not Power 5 kids coming to Colorado to go play for Deion. Right. So they're all guys who are going to take a step up in class, a step up in talent, and it's going to be a little bit of a culture shock, especially early on in the year. So no, I'm not going to back them to win more than 3 games. I'm not saying that I would slam the under. I don't think that's the play, but I'm just saying it's a wait and see. I would lean on the under. I just don't think that they can make that big of a jump in 1 year to be able to say, okay, yeah, here we are. We're absolutely going to be able to, be able to lock teams down. Last year they gave up 509 yards per game. Again, let's just bring that down a notch. If they shave off, okay, I even give them, if they shave off 80 yards
Right.
at 430, that still puts them 10th in the conference. They've risen 2 spots from the worst defense in the conference to the 10th worst defense. How many games are you going to win against USC, UCLA, Oregon, Utah? Without even looking at their schedule, but you get my point. You're not going to be that much better. So that's my argument against Colorado this year.
I think it's a good point on that one when you talk about their schedule. It's like it's not like they have bunnies in the non-conference schedule either. They have to go to TCU, they have to go play Nebraska as their home opener. These are teams that are really going to challenge this team. And then you have a new OC that's coming over, head coach for Kent State. He's gonna, he kind of runs a high octane offense.
Very high octane offense.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's going to be very quick. I think you can't just turn that offense over in a year. Sanders does come over as the new quarterback, the coach's son. He was a candidate for what is considered the FCS Heisman last year at Jackson State. But I question the fact that, different competition, you're moving up to FBS. It's almost like a minor league MVP going up to the majors. It's like it's going to be a whole different transition on this one. The running backs, I kind of like the running back core in there. Cavate Smoke has come over from Kentucky. Alton McCaskill.
Gotta love that name.
Yeah, it's one of those top 5, 10 college football names. It's terrific. And I always remember Cavate Smoke.
Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yeah, absolutely. Alton McCaskill does come over as well. So the core for the running backs is solid. Wide receivers are all brand new. I think he wants to have Travis Hunter, his top recruit, kind of do both offense and defense, like Sanders might have had to do when he was in college. But I don't know if that's going to be the answer here. You need guys that are like true talented wide receivers.
Here's the other part of this, just from a big season perspective. Yep. All the things you say, look, I actually believe the offense can be a lot better, right? Even if you do the
can't get worse,
But let's just say Shedeur Sanders is all that in a bag of chips, and these wide receivers and the running backs and this fast-paced offense that they want to play, all that starts to click. And even if they rise to the fifth best offense from yards and points in the Pac-12. You know what the problem is? Their defense is still going to be incredibly god-awful.
Yeah.
3 returning starters coming back. And I know that they grabbed the portal and they're going to have more talent around, but that's going to be a lot harder for them to figure. Those kids are going to be in for a world of hurt going up against Caleb Williams, going up against Cam Rising, going up against Bo Nix for their 17th year in college. They're not going to be able to figure out how to slow down these offenses in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And now transition to the defense. I mean, the defensive coordinator, granted, he has defensive coordinator experience, but he hasn't been a DC since 2017. Kind of just been a positional coach for the past 4 or 5 years at Alabama. But this is a team that gave up 6.1 yards per carry on the ground last year to their opponents. All rebuilt on the defensive line and the linebackers. I think the strength of this defense is the D-backs. They have a top recruit freshman, Cormani McClain, that's coming in, but he's young. He's going to have some learning experience to do. They do get Travis Hunter, and they bring over Craig Jr. as well, as from the Jackson State core. But FCS guys versus FBS talent is going to be a little bit of a transition for that team. So overall, tough ass schedule. And it's funny because I had Brian Power on for the Big Ten show, and he brought up week 2 Colorado versus Nebraska, and how Nebraska is in a really good spot in that game. I think it's at -8.5 right now. I like that number no matter what. I think Nebraska can really get it done there, and I think right now you have to fade the overhype of Deion Sanders right now. I think the public is kind of thinking over this team's going to be great, that Deion's there. I was like, Deion is an FCS coach. He hasn't had the FBS experience right now, and quite frankly, what he's doing is completely unorthodox than to what other head coaches jumping in the position have done. You want to maintain the guys there. You don't want to scare them away. And I don't know if this is a good strategy for him or not, but time will tell. But I think this year, another team, just like Stanford, on the rebuild. I have no opinion on that total at all at 3.5 wins, but that is telling to me that there's not going to be much of a growth this season from
It would be
Colorado.
under a pass for me. Again, I wouldn't hit it hard. I will say this much though. Again, like I said, I think there's a possibility from game to game here to play a lot of overs for two reasons. One, I think Shador Sanders, just as a player, with his father, hey, just take the ball and run around all over the field and make somebody try to catch you. You might be the fastest guy out there. And, it can create havoc and keep them offensively in games in certain spots, right? And two, I don't think Dion, even when he's trailing, is ever going to pull his foot off the gas pedal and say, "Okay, we'll mail this one in." Their offense is going to play a full 4 quarters every single time. So you might get some late sort of backdoor covers to the over, but I would look individual game overs just because, again, I think the offense with Shador Sanders might be a step ahead of the defense, who's going to give up a ton of points.
And especially with an inexperienced defense, I think they're going to give up a lot. So they're going to have to score points to stay in a lot of the games. That's a good take on totals there from Mark Zeno. So you can go check him out at Mark Zeno on Twitter. All right, next team on the board here, the Sun Devils. A lot of transition with this team as well as Kenny Dillingham steps in, first-year coach there. 13 starters back for him, 8 on the offense, 5 on the defensive side, 3-9, 2-7 in the conference last season. 32nd toughest schedule, over and under on the win total is 4.5. I do have a take on the total on this one, but I'll pass it to you, Mark. What do you think of the Sun Devils?
Under 4.5. That's probably one of my total bets that I'll hit. This is not a team right now that I think presents a lot of good characteristics for a winning football team at this point in time, and their schedule doesn't help them out at all when it comes to being able to get over this number. They got to go to Oklahoma State. I'm sorry, they got to play Oklahoma State rather. They may even lose to Fresno. I doubt that they might be able to win that game, but they'll play Southern Utah. They might be able to beat Cal, even though that game is on the road. But if you look down the rest of it, after Cal, I don't, and Colorado is a game that they can win. But the final 6 games of the year, I think they're 0-6. Washington, Washington State, at Utah, at UCLA, Oregon, and then Arizona. And by that time, when they get to Arizona, they might be so beat up and dead that they're not even going to worry about it anyway. So, I mean, I see like 2 definitive wins here. One against Colorado probably, and the other against Southern Utah. But, I would love if they are laying points to Fresno State at home, which I think they will be. I might be taking the Bulldogs in that spot. That's how little faith I have in this Arizona State team at this point in time. I just don't think they're going to be very good. I'm not sure where the running game comes from now. Listen, Jaden Daniels is over here now, right? I mean, he's the guy from LSU, and I don't know that he is any level of competent when it comes to. Well, they also have Drew Pine, right?
No, Drew Pine's going to be the starter for him.
Drew Pine's going to be the starter.
Yep.
This is a kid from Notre Dame, right?
Yeah, correct.
Look at that offense. Like the Notre Dame offense. I mean, they were stagnant under Drew Pine. They're not going to get anywhere with this with him under center. So their defense leaves a lot to be desired. And I think between the investigation that led to recruiting violations and 5 coaches their jobs, a lot of distraction this offseason. They dealt with plenty of transfers. They have just 9 returning starters. It's the fewest in the Pac-12. This is a spot here where I don't think this team is going to be very good.
All right, counterpoint on this one. I actually like the over on this one, 4.5 wins, and I'll tell you why. And I know I saw the back half of their season, and it's really going to come down to can they win one game in this one. And I'll say this: it's like I can see anybody's argument on just scheduling alone for this team, but I think this team could end up 4-2 going into their 7th game, and now they got to go and really buckle down. But I've seen Drew Pine play. I watch every snap of every Notre Dame game in my entire life.
Bastard.
so I know who Drew Pine is. I was like, I'm not going to take anything away from the talent that he has. He had 65% completion rate, 22 touchdowns, 6 INTs when he was the quarterback there. So he did give himself worth. And I think it's an upgrade from Emory Jones. Granted that Drew Pine isn't as mobile as he is. I think he's a better passer and he's more pro style that will kind of fit into this offense that Kenny Dillingham's going to be bringing in here. And then, of course, The running back is always a concern because Valladay was such a great runner for him last year. He was a transfer that came over from Wyoming, I believe, and he had over 1,000 yards rushing last season. But they do bring the top rusher from the Big Sky, Sacramento State. You mentioned Sacramento State, great running team. Cameron Skatebo, he's going to be the running back for them. I think he's going to transition in there well. But we'll see if that transition from the SES to the FBS competition is going to be favorable for him. Top three wide receivers are back as well for the Arizona State Sun Devils. And while the offensive line is a little bit of a concern on this one because 4 starters are gone, but they do add 6 transfers coming in on this one. But as far as the starters that left last year, this is a team that had a 6.9% sack rate. They allowed a lot on the pressure to the quarterback on this one. So I think this is going to be an improvement getting the transfers coming in.
I'm curious about the offense and Bo Baldwin. And look, he didn't have a ton of success at Cal Poly. He's
Yeah.
4-21 over the last 3 years. But he also won 5 Big Sky titles when he was the head coach of Eastern Washington. So, yeah, it's tough. If you're putting it on Drew Pine and the passing game, how confident do you really feel, I guess, is the question.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be world beaters. I'm going to say they can win at least 5 games. That's pretty much what I'm saying on this one. And they can compete.
I would tell you again, like you said, they have to do it on the front end. So they've got to beat Southern Utah. They got to beat Fresno. They got to beat Cal. And they got to beat Colorado. They have to win those 4 games.
Yep.
And I would look at that Fresno game. They lose that game, I think there's no shot they're under hits. I mean, where's the game they steal down the? It's either Washington State or Arizona, right? It's probably Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona. Arizona's not going to be very good. I consider that kind of like the team that they're going to beat with this one.
You're going to sweat that out till November 25th, then the very last week.
Yeah, I know I will be. That's why I said I think it's going to come down to that last game of the season where they're going to have they're going to be 4-2. They're going to lose the rest of their games, and it's going to come down to Arizona. And I'll take my I'll take that to the bank on this one. And you know, I'm not putting like major money on these over and under wins, but I was trying to find opportunities on this one. Really hard with this conference altogether. I found 2, but this is one of the ones I thought was more favorable as far as the number goes. But with the defense on this one, I think the strength, they're going to be one of the toughest secondaries in the country. I think they bring back a lot of experience in the secondary. They get 2 starters back on this one, plus they get some transfers from Austin Peay and USC. But all these guys are seniors. There's you look at the lineup, they're all veteran units. They're all disciplined. I think if there's any strength in this one, they're going to be great against the pass. I do question what they can do up front as far as stopping the run and putting pressure onto the other QBs. But this defense should be kind of on par what they do last year. And I think with the offense, who I consider a slight upgrade. This team did win only 3 games last season, but you had to consider the fact that they fired their head coach mid-season. I think this is going to be a team that's going to be really contesting for that last win. I think they do fall 4-2 after 6 games, and they're going to be competing in the last game of the season, like you said. So I'm going to be taking the over on this one as my official pick on this one, 4.5 wins. While Mark is on the opposite side, so we'll meet. See what happens with the Sun Devils. Right, wrong, or indifferent. All right, next team we're going to be talking about on this one is the Arizona Wildcats. Jed Fish, 3rd year with the team, 11 starters back for them, 8 on the offense, 3 on the defensive side, 5-7 last season, 3-6 in the conference. 39th toughest schedule, over and under for them is 4.5 wins. What are your thoughts on the Wildcats, Mark?
It's all about their offense, right? Jaden DeLaura and what he's going to be able to do. They have a very good wide receiving core. They throw the ball all over the yard. This is a team here where you look to play a lot of overs. Their defense clearly leaves something to be desired. But when you're looking at, what did you say, 5.5 here?
4.5.
4.5. I would lean over. They have 3 very winnable games to start. Northern Arizona at Mississippi State. Yes, I think Mississippi State is a winnable game, despite the fact that it's on the road, because Mississippi State's defense isn't very good, and they're in a state of transition too, as well. And then they play UTEP They'll beat Stanford. If they can start 4-0 somehow, you're in cruise control for the rest of the year with a game against Colorado and Arizona State left. Even if they don't beat Mississippi State, you have Northern Arizona, UTEP, Stanford, Colorado, and Arizona State left on the schedule.
Yeah.
Could you sneak out a home win versus Washington or UCLA? Probably not. Probably definitively not against Utah. Could you win a road game at Washington State? Maybe. I would go over. I would go over the 4.5 here with the Arizona Wildcats. There's a lot to like about this offense and what Jed Fish has done. It's just a question of defense more than anything, and how much can they stop the run? They haven't finished in the top half of the league in rush defense. Get this. Now going on 13 years when it was still the Pac-10.
Wow.
So they got 8 starters back, but still they allowed almost 6 yards a carry last year and 36 points per game on defense. So Jed Fish hit the portal defensively. I don't know how much it's going to help them, but at least they're trying to address it here. So and when you look around the Pac-12, here's the other thing too. Even though they can't stop the run, when you look around, the teams that really focus on the run game, right? Used to be Stanford. You don't have to worry about them. Oregon State will run the ball. Absolutely. Utah will run the ball. UCLA loses Zach Charbonnet. I mean, my point is that it's not like they're facing a ton of high-level running teams, right?
Right.
They're facing more passing teams than run teams. So maybe some of that weakness gets a little bit disguised.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you look at this team, though. It's basically a high octane offense and a defense that is completely suspect. I mean, that's kind of been the MO for the Wildcats on this one. Jane Delara does come back, and he was the number 2 passer for in the Pac-12 last year. 62.5% pass completion rate, 25 touchdowns, 13 INTs, and he is back. They get their top 5 rushers back as well. Michael Wiley does come back at 806 yards rushing last season, 6.8 yards per carry. And they get a slew of wide receivers back. They're loaded for bear as far as the offense is concerned, including
they even got a good tight end. Tanner McLaughlin.
Yes.
The kid Tanner McLaughlin is a great receiving threat.
Yeah, plus they get 1,000-yard receiver Jacob Cowling back too.
Yep.
He's going to be a lead on this one, and then you got the 3 starters back on the offensive line. This is a line that put up allowed their rushers 4.9 yards per carry last season and gave up 23 sacks. And they have some true freshmen that are going to be stepping up and filling in the void. So that may be a question mark for them to see is the development of the offensive line. But we always go back to the defense. Only 1 out of their top 7 tacklers are back on this one. Slew of transfers, basically going to be filling in the voids. They lose their top 3 DBs, all replaced with sophomores. They can't get any worse. This is a team that was 126 against the pass last season. So I think they have to improve on this one as far as the defense is concerned. And then you have, basically to put it all together, offense is going to be great. QB's back, running backs back, deep wide receiver core. But tough games on this one. Mississippi State at Mississippi State, so they have to deal with the cowbells. Then you got Washington at USC, Oregon State, UCLA, and Utah. Really tough schedule. Only 4 conference home games, and their winnable games are basically Colorado, Arizona State, Washington State, and Stanford. So I don't know. This team does contend for a bowl to me. I probably lean on the overside on them. 5 wins last season, but you have the over and under win total at 4.5. They're basically saying this team's going to be on par from last season.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So that's my take on the Arizona Wildcats. Moving on here, as I'm wearing the hat on the top of my noggin right now, is the Cal Bears. There's no take on this one as far as any picks are concerned. I just felt like putting on a Pac-12 hat on this one. 4-8 last season with this team, 2-7 in the conference. 17 returning starters, though, so that's promising for them. Justin Wilcox takes in his 7th year with the team, 9th toughest schedule, unfortunately. Over and under is 5.5. What are your thoughts on the Cal Bears, Mark?
I would lean under. North Texas, Idaho, Arizona State, all winnable games there. They have another gauntlet down the back end other than Stanford. Yeah. After Arizona State, it's Oregon State, one of the better defenses in the conference. at Utah, USC, at Oregon, Washington State. You get at Stanford and at UCLA to finish out the year. I mean, and their one non-conference game is against Auburn. I don't. I mean, it's got to be under, right? Like, where do they steal a win? Even could they beat Washington State at home? Maybe. But other than that, USC's coming in there, and then their other games, and Oregon State, they're not winning either one of those games. They're just, unless Oregon State has some major fall off, which I don't anticipate, and they're certainly not going to beat USC as long as Caleb Williams is healthy. So tell me where their fourth and fifth wins are. I'm having a hard time really seeing it. So I would lean under.
Yeah, I think the line. I mean, they won 4 games last year. The over-under is 5.5. I don't know if they can. That's basically saying, is this team a bowl team or not? But they have a new OC coming in from Texas State. He was the head coach there, but he was also under Sonny Dykes at Louisiana Tech. And when he was the OC there, he was the number 10 offense in the country as the OC. But who's the quarterback of the team? Because Plummer's gone. Plummer transfers out. I think they're going to have to compete on this one. They bring in some transfers from TCU and NC State, but none of them really have starting experience. So I big question marks at the QB position. Running back, they do get their top running back in Jaden Ott back. He had 5.3 yards per carry last season, just under 1,000 yards overall. And then they go into the transfer portal for depth. So solid unit as the running goes. 4 out of their 5 receivers are back as well, but who's going to throw them the ball is the question. 5 offensive linemen return here, and they get an added transfer from Texas A&M. So this is a team that needs to improve because they gave up 31 sacks last season, 3.6 yards per carry to their rushers. Only one way it up. They're going to be a lot more experienced this year. From the defensive standpoint, 4 out of their 5 top tacklers are back.
I think they returned 9 starters on defense there, Guns.
That's correct. 9 starters on the defensive side, 4 out of their top 6 tacklers, but they lose their number 2 and their number 3. The whole unit's back for the defensive line. Linebackers, they do get their number 1 tackler in Sermon, who's an absolute beast out there. So I think he's going to have a great year for them. And they get some transfers from Clemson and Florida to fill in the void. That's going to be the strength of that unit. But overall, like you said, they open up with North Texas. Then they got Auburn, and then they got to go at Washington for the Pac-12 opener. They have a really, really tough schedule altogether.
They do. I mean, go back to their 4 wins from last year. UC Davis and UNLV, obviously, easy ones. Okay, easy. Stanford was their one conference win. Their other conference win was against Arizona. Why? Because Arizona's defense was terrible, and they allowed 49 points to a team that probably didn't score 40. I don't even think they scored 49 points the rest of the year. Let me just double check.
Yeah.
No, that was there was the highest scoring game of the season. In fact, they barely broke 30 the rest of the year. They scored 35 against USC, and that was it. So after they scored 49 against they only broke 30 one of the time the rest of the year. So that's a blip on the radar. I don't see it, Guns. And they get to 5.
I'm with you too, and it's nothing that I'm going to take as an official on this one. But I also make a point on this one. Granted, they were 4-8 last season, but they lost 3 games by possession or less. So they were competing in a lot of these cases. Unfortunately, I don't. Having the question mark at quarterback, who's going to be running the offense? You have a new OC there. This team defensively is not alarming.
They need to get better getting to the quarterback defensively. They only had 19 sacks.
Yeah, terrible.
Enough, especially in this again. Look at all the quarterbacks that are in this conference. Like, you got to be able to affect the quarterback. Cal was very good last year. And they weren't very good in time possession either. Their offense wasn't even holding the ball 28 minutes a game. Like, you can't score theoretically if you don't have the ball. It's really hard to score when you don't possess the football.
And if anything you have to do in the Pac-12 is in conference play, you have to score points.
Yes.
Because there's so many elite offenses here in the Pac-12. Moving on to the next team in the lineup as we grow into some of the more competitive teams in here. And we're going to be talking about some quarterbacks that have potential of being Heisman hopefuls as well. Really elite conference altogether as far as the quarterbacks go. But we're going to talk about Washington State on this one. 7-6 last season. 12 returning starters, 7 on the offense, 5 on the defensive side. Jake Dickert in his 3rd year with the team. Pullman, Washington is the spot. Pretty reasonable schedule. 61st toughest in the country. New OC Ben Arbuckle from Western Kentucky comes over. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts here on the Cougars?
Well, it doesn't have Bailey Zappi with him. So,
That's no, he doesn't.
but I mean, there's a sense that he may try to take Cam Ward and do that, and allow him to have that sort of freedom in the offense and throw with that level of consistency. I mean, this is a team that I think when push comes to shove, um, they will feature a lot more downfield throws. They're going to take a lot more shots down the field. And I think if Cam Ward can play to a level, they may be able to surprise some teams. Like, this is one of these teams where you look at it and you go, how much can they how much can they steal a win from somebody we don't expect them to, because of their offense, right? Um, is it a game like, and again, they're playing Wisconsin in week 2. Is that a game where their big shots that they take down the field and the plays that they make could change the tide of the game? Possibly. I mean, is it possible they could win that game or at least make it competitive? Yeah. If the offense clicks the way we think it's going to. So I wouldn't discount this team. They may give some teams some trouble at some point in time, and really, really shake things up as far as the Pac-12 is concerned.
Yeah, they're going to be this wild card in this bunch of top 4, top 5 teams that could really come into either playing at home and beating a team in a weird spot. This is kind of one of those teams that kind of falls into there. So it's going to be good to watch the Cougars in this one. But you mentioned Cam Ward is going to be coming in this one. They do have a new OC on this one, so we'll see if he improves his numbers on this one. He had 23 touchdowns and 9 INTs last season, 64.4 pass completion rate. So he is a solid quarterback for them. And then they get their top rusher back from last season in Nakia Watson and Jalen Jenkins. So
Watson's averaged almost 6 yards a carry last year. I think that should be in that. It should stay in that clip there, Guns, right? Like I wouldn't expect it just because they throw the ball all over the place. I wouldn't expect their running game to totally disappear. I think that's still going to be a big part of what they do.
Yeah, and then Jalen Jenkins too. They really like both of those guys together combined for over 1,200 yards rushing. So they kind of use them as a 1-2 punch, and really distributed the load between the two of them. Wide receivers, they do lose their top 4 receivers from last season, but they get a slew of transfers coming in from the Mountain West. So it's like UNLV, Fresno State, San Jose State. So the group has starting experience, and they should be pretty solid. And Cam Ward is just he's going to distribute the ball well to these transfers.
Like, if things go well for them, right? This is a bowl team.
Yes.
I mean, in reality, like, their home schedule is very favorable. Colorado at home, Stanford at home, Arizona at home with a bad defense. Oregon State may be their toughest home contest. Well, Wisconsin. I mean,
Wisconsin's going to be tough too. Yeah.
Right. So, those are 4 winnable conference games at home. I'm sorry, 3 winnable conference games at home against Colorado, Stanford, and Arizona. They have to travel to Arizona State. That's a plus. They'll beat them because they're good enough to do it. And now you're looking at stealing a win from maybe Cal on the road, right?
Right.
You're not going to beat Oregon. Probably not going to beat UCLA unless Chip Kelly falls apart. I don't think that's going to happen. But, the Oregon State game is going to be really interesting. Like, it won't shock me. I know Oregon State now has DJU, but let's just say, it takes DJU 2 or 3 games to get his legs underneath him, and he's still not like in full season mode yet,
Right.
Which we saw a little bit at Clemson. They might be able to take advantage of Oregon State at home in that spot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I agree with you on that one. Defensively is kind of the question on this team altogether. I think the offense is going to be kind of relatively strong, if not improved from last season. But the linebackers are really depleted. They basically had to go to the transfer portal, but no one out of the transfers that they got has starting experience. So they're very an inexperienced unit as far as the linebackers are concerned. Secondary, 3 starters back for them, so they should be an improved unit. Overall, their defense is probably the question mark, and they have a new DC that's coming over from Auburn. So really, the coaching, the OC, the DC are going to be brand new for this team. We don't really know how that's going to affect the production of the team altogether. But offensively, I don't hate the number on this one, 6.5. I think this team is a bowl team. I just don't know if they're a 7-win in a season type of team, but I think time will tell. on the Cougars. But I think, yeah, they're going to be one of those teams that in positions against top teams, they're going to shake things up and scare a few teams for sure. But going on to the next team on this one, let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's go into some teams that have a little bit of talent on this squad. UCLA Bruins, granted, they lost the heartbeat of their offense, but I think the replacements are going to be favorable for them as we talk about.
Wait, hold on. I'm just curious. Who was the heartbeat of their offense, in your opinion? Which one was
it? It was DTR and Cabernet. Those guys.
I would say Charbonnet was more the heartbeat of their offense. I think that DTR was more the central nervous system, if you will.
I think of them as like, you do that dual threat RPO style.
Yes.
From a running standpoint, you're correct, but yes, a little bit scary when it comes to passing for DTR in this one. 9-4, this team was last season, 6-3 in the conference. 16 returning starters come from them, so that is a positive. 7 on the offense, 9 on the defensive side. Los Angeles, California, and they get a nice, sweet schedule on this one. 72nd toughest in the country. I'll pass it to you, Mark. Over and under 8.5 wins. Is UCLA a 10-win team? Go.
I can't give you any answer until I see Dante Moore play. Dante Moore, their true freshman quarterback, like number 3 prospect in the country.
Yeah.
This kid is everything. Like, he's DTR on steroids. He's supposed to be that level good. 6'3", 210 pounds. I mean, the kid is just a monster. We saw a little bit of him in the spring game, right? He looked very impressive, but they get the Kent State transfer, Colin Schlee, who, is more of I think a little bit more of a pure passer necessarily than Dante Moore. But, if Moore is what everybody is forecasting him to be, this is a guy that elevates to Ohio State the way Justin Fields did. Offensively.
Yeah.
With Charbonnet gone, they're going to turn to Carson Steele's probably 1,000-yard rusher in Chip Kelly's offense, right? Chip's going to run the ball regardless. He's not getting away from that. That's who he has been. It's who he was at Oregon. It's who he was in the NFL. It's who he is here at UCLA. But this whole entire thing to me rests on the linchpin of who's playing quarterback for them. Are they going to sit more and let Schlee, with the experience, do it all? Can either one of these guys top what DTR did last year? It remains to be seen. That's why it's really hard to forecast. Everything is saying that they are, but if these quarterbacks struggle, Guns, and they are having problems putting points up on the board, thankfully, they're going to have a really good defense again this year. 9 returning starters should be what I think is the best defense under Chip Kelly since he's been at UCLA. But I just, I can look at the schedule and forecast win. Like, I can do all those things, but I have no idea what the quarterback position truly looks like. I can forecast it as best. Look, if Dante Moore is everything we think he is, yes, it's a 10-win team. Absolutely is.
Yeah, I think there's going to be growing pains early for him, but it's as highly touted as he is as a recruit.
But again, growing pains early against Coastal Carolina, San Diego State, North and Central are Correct. Good.
Yes.
Right? Then you get to your first conference game at the end of September and have to walk in to Provo, that's Salt Lake City. Provo's where BYU is. But you got to go to Utah regardless, that whole state, and play in elevation. And guess what? Against the most physical, toughest team in the conference, like, that's your wake up. That's your baptism by fire right there.
Yeah. They have they have 3 tough Pac-12 road teams. You got USC, Utah, and Oregon State.
Yeah.
And Oregon State and Utah own their stadiums at home. So that's going to be tough for them. But you mentioned it here. Dante Moore, I got him. I saw him on 247 Sports. He was ranked number 4 overall 2023 recruiting class. So he is highly touted as the next guy. But there is but the question is, losing Charbonnet, that's a tough loss. He was a heartbeat of that offense. I agree with that 100%. But they bring in Carson Steele from Ball State, and that guy is no, meat bag for any means. He had over 1,500 yards rushing last season. So this is a really good replacement for Charbonnet. If anything, they have the potential of being right on par with how they were last year with DTR and Charbonnet in the lineup. I'm really excited to see what Dante Moore does on this one. They do have their top 2 receivers back.
He's the starter. I mean, have they officially anointed him the starter?
I don't
Wait,
unless I mean, I'm bet like everything that I'm saying right now is me predicating the fact that he's going to be the guy
right.
for
But
most of the
I don't
games
think
this
they've
season.
officially I haven't checked in a
No.
couple of weeks, but I don't think they've officially named him the, hey, Dante, this is your team, go.
Yeah, I don't. But you look at the transfer from Kent State, like you mentioned. Could he be the starter? Yes, but I think the dynamic and how Chip Kelly wants to run that offense, I think Dante Moore is more perfect for the
I
position.
I just hope he doesn't do the stupid thing with the rotating quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, you can't build confidence with a quarterback if you do that. I mean, you're always like looking at the sideline, wondering if they're going to take you out or not. I agree with you on that one. I think Chip
Oh, by
Kelly's
the
just
way,
going to pick a guy and go.
one other thing in the running game that we forgot to mention too, they get a transfer from Army. The kid's name Atkins, Anthony Atkins,
Yep.
and just from a pure runner standpoint and running experience standpoint, this is a guy who averaged nearly 6 yards a carry at Army. Now, again, completely different offense, but that's a lot of experience. A senior kid who's coming over, who's got a lot of tread on the tires in the run game to help out
Yep.
Chip Kelly. They're going to be a good offense, I
Yep.
think. I feel confident, regardless of who's that quarterback, because I think Chip Kelly's scheme always lends to that, Guns. Like it
Yeah.
always to him having a good offense.
Yeah, I think if Dante Moore is hypothetically the starter of there, he has all the weapons around him. So he's got two top receivers back and the top tight end back from last season. The O line was decent. They only lose one starter from last season, but uh, they add a lot of depth on that line. That offensive line is really going to be solid, whether they have injuries or not. I think this is going to be a good line. This is a line that let the running backs get 6 yards per carry. Granted, Charbonnet was just an absolute weapon.
Yeah.
Only gave up 19 sacks last season. So whoever steps in behind center is going to be well protected and has the weapons to choose from. But you mentioned the defense on this one, and I think this is a key point to the success of UCLA this season. This is the best defense Chip Kelly has ever had, and I circled that in my notes. 3 out of their 6 top tacklers are back, including their number 1 tackler. They got a new DC coming over from the Ravens, and 2 starters back on the defensive line. They do lose 2 starters on the lot with the linebackers, but they get their number 1 tackler back, and they get Cal's top tackler from last season to come over in the transfer portal. So that is going to be a experienced group. And they lose their number 2 and number 3 tacklers in the D backs. They do get a solid transfer from Bowling Green and Jordan Anderson. So I think even though with the losses on this one, still going to be a very experienced group because that team had the D backs had some depth on UCLA last season. But I think it's all going to come down to, is Dante Moore the guy? Is he going to be starting on week 1? Are they going to go with the transfer from Kent State? 3 tough road games in the Pac-12, but they don't have to play Washington. They don't have to play Oregon, and all their other games are winnable. So there's really 3 tough games for them on the slate. The over and under on this one is 8.5. It's interesting. I find it interesting that this was a 9-win team last season. This season, they lose their top 2 offensive weapons, DTR and Charbonnet, and the over and under is only 8.5. Tells me a little bit of a story on this one. I think this team is 9 to 10 wins and really can make a good push for the Pac-12 championship here.
I mean, look, they may be you may look back at the season and go, they were 1 or 2 plays away from being in the Pac-12 title game.
Absolutely. And I had that.
Yeah. Around if they're there, it's like if those 2 plays don't happen, they're not in the title game. Like I think they're that close.
But yeah, like I said, they got a favorable schedule, 3 tough games, and if you do the math, that's 9 wins. So I think they can get those 9 wins easy. It's going to come down to Utah, USC, and Oregon on the road. So I like the over on this one. UCLA 8.5 wins. That's going to be my second total play on this one. I don't know. I'm trusting Dante Moore, and I think he's going to be a true talent in here. And I think the way they tout him, he's got to be better than DTR to me. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yes. You get that feeling, yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Hopefully he doesn't, listen to all the stories and the hype, whatever, and just kind of like focuses and doesn't be a dud. But we'll see what happens on this one. Now we're moving into Oregon State Beavers. 10-3 last season. Great team. I loved betting on Oregon State last season in a bunch of spots. 6-3 in the conference, 13 returning starters, 8 on the offense, 5 on the defensive side. Jonathan Smith, 6th year with the team. Corvallis is the spot here, folks. 57th toughest schedule in the country. Over and under is 8.5 wins for this team. What are your thoughts on the Oregon State Beavers?
Well, we get DJU in the fold, right? Transfers from Clemson, starts to. Well, by the way, he was drafted in Major League Baseball. I don't know if you caught that, Guns.
Oh,
DJU got drafted in the Major League Baseball draft. Strange as it may be. Look, this team is all about their defense, right? The problem is last year they had 9 starters back that returned. This year they only have 5. So they may take a little bit of a step back. Does DJU make up for that with the ability to score more? You know, here's my thing. Damian Martinez, their running back, is awesome, right? He averaged 6.1 yards a carry last year. Like, he was a big part of what made that team successful because their quarterback play wasn't very good. They had Ben Gulbranson, and just a bunch of other mediocre guys last year. Chance Nolan, I think it was, or
yes,
I forget it. Yeah, it was going back and forth between Nolan and Gulbranson last year at one point. So they get an upgrade at quarterback, but still, I think they would be wise to give the ball and give the rock to Martinez more than not. The interesting part, too, is offensively, and I don't know how much you put into this, but for a guy like DJU, who really hasn't been incredibly accurate throughout his career, maybe it was just the level of competition that he was playing in the ACC or what, but he doesn't have a very big wide receiving core. Like, Trevor Pope's 6'2", Jimmy Velson is 6'2". Everybody else is under 6 feet. And for a guy who, questionable quarterback skills for the most part beyond running the football, if he doesn't have big targets to throw to, I'm curious to see how they employ him in the offense and how much they're going to ask him to throw when you have a guy like Martinez who can run the ball as well as they can. I don't know if that, makes sense, but I wonder what they want to do offensively now that DJU is here. Are they just going to ask him to be a little bit better than Nolan and Gulbranson, or are they going to ask him to carry an offense? I think those two things are, very much a question mark about where this team could be overall. It's one of the most exciting times in Corvallis that they've had in years.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's a lot of hype around this team. I still think defensively they'll be very good. The offense gives me a little bit pause. It's kind of one of those things when I look at their schedule, I really want to wait and see how they play, particularly against San Diego State, which is an upper level FCS team that could give them fits. They got to go to Washington State in week 4. That game should be really telling, and they'll get their first true test at home before the end of September when they host Utah.
Yeah. I mean, road games that looking at Washington State, Cal, Arizona, Colorado, at Oregon.
Those other 3-4 road games are really favorable for them.
And they want to play their the toughest teams at home, and they get Utah, UCLA, Stanford, Washington at home this season. This team is 12-1 straight up in the last 2 years at home, and they rebuilt their stadium, so they're going to have a little bit of extra room for the fans on this one. It's going to be interesting here with DJ Uiagalelei taking over the starting role here. But you said it best. It was he was so wishy-washy at Clemson. You don't know if this is going to really mold to make him successful as a quarterback. The running back on this one, you mentioned Martinez, 6.1 yards per carry. I think top 4 rushers are going to be back for them as well. So they're really deep, and of course they have Damian Martinez to carry the load. The wide receivers, like you mentioned, not really a good, solid, talented a bunch of wide receivers, but well distributed. All of them were I think 500 yards or under or something like that. All 3 of them. So it was well distributed. But does DJ make those guys talented?
Saying it was well distributed, or the offense was just impotent in the past.
In the past, yeah, okay. Well, fair. That's what I mean. It's there's no true guy that's the number 1 wide receiver. There wasn't a guy like that. That's why I used the word well distributed.
If you said 4 guys at 800 yards, then I'm getting excited. 4 guys at 400 yards, 2,000 passing yards in a 13-game season was not very good.
No, I think a lot of those guys wouldn't be starting for a multitude of teams.
The team we're probably going to talk about next, but we'll have 2,000 passing yards in 4 weeks. What are you talking about?
Yeah, very good point on this one. But the defense on this one, 20 sacks last season. They got to improve on that one. 3.8 yards per carry. So they were good against the run. Uh, only one of their top 5 tacklers are going to be back on this one. They lose one starter on the defensive line. A lot of experience there, so that's going to be a loaded unit. Their top 2 linebackers from last season, they lose them, but they get back 2 starters and they go to the portal to fill in the voids on this one. So at least the guys from the portal have some starting experience. They're not just like guys that were in the back of the back of the pack on the teams that they played for. The D-backs, 5 of their top 8 DBs from last season return, but they lost 3 that were vital to the success of what Oregon State does. So that's going to be something that they're going to have to find the replacements in the success that they had last season. I don't know if they're going to match that defensively. But schedule-wise, really favorable on this one. I think they can contend for a Pac-12 championship. I think they just need to win every single. Its problem is they got tough, stiff competition when it comes to their home games, which you want to be playing Utah, UCLA, and Washington at home. And their conference road games are favorable. They don't have to play USC in the regular season. So, could they get to the level of where they were last season? Maybe, sure. But I think this year is just going to be the competition is a lot stiffer, a lot more experience on the teams that are ahead of them. So we'll see what happens here with the boys at Corvallis. Moving on to what I say is, you have 4 guys, 4 quarterbacks that are going to be Heisman hopefuls on this one, in my opinion. And we're going to be talking about them back to back to back to back. And we're going to start with the Washington Huskies. This is a team that is drastically improved from last, especially in 2022. 11-2 as a team, 7-2 in the conference, 15 returning starters, 7 on the offense, 8 on the defense. DeBauer coming in second year. He has a great group to back him up in his second year as the head coach. 52nd toughest schedule in the country. Over and under 9.5 wins for the Huskies. What are your thoughts here on Washington, Mark?
10 wins might be too much. 9-3 maybe might be more the sweet spot. Look, Michael Penix threw for nearly 4,200 yards last year, and he's going to be in the Heisman conversation. They're going to be a Pac-12 playoff contender when it comes to, like, as far as being in the title game. And, very slim outside shot to make the college football playoff, if you ask me. Here's the one problem that I see. If you go back to last year, Guns, and look at some of the games that they won, they had like 3 games I think I can recall where they just eked out a win.
Yep.
And I don't know, a 24-21 win versus Oregon State. They won by 3 at Oregon, which is a game I remember that game. They probably shouldn't have won that game. And I think there was one more earlier in the year. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't know if they get that same level of advantage this year in being able to do it. It kind of just changes 10-2 to 9-3 and 8-4. Again, one of those goes and everything just looks different. That said, when you have a weapon like Michael Penix Jr., could you win close games? Yeah, absolutely can. 100%. Like that's why you have him there, is to be able to help you win those games in those moments. So, it was the Cal game last year that they had to eke out a win at Cal. That's right. They struggled in that game. Right. Regardless, it just popped back up in my head as I looked at the schedule. I like Washington a lot. There's no reason not to. Is their defense going to be better? I would hope so, but they have 8 starters back. So they should be able to take a step forward defensively. That's going to take a little bit of pressure off their offense. The issue is too, and here's the danger spot. Penix, when he was at Indiana, was like hurt a lot.
Yeah.
If he goes down, they have nothing. They literally have nothing. Like,
right.
Go look at their depth chart. There's not even a running back listed on it. Like, they don't need one. No. The only guy who's going to run the ball is Michael Penix Jr. So, I don't know how much I want to put faith in everything on one guy doing it all and him staying healthy for 12 consecutive games, especially the way he plays a position. That's my hesitation. I don't think anything is wrong, and I guarantee you, everything you're going to say about this team is going to be 100% accurate. But their schedule is a little bit tougher as they get USC and Utah. They didn't have them last year, and you know, I just have injury concerns and his ability to stay healthy for an entire year.
They have an absolute gauntlet to go through in October, November. It's just an
Yes.
absolute brutal schedule, but this team could really be, in my opinion, sitting 8-0 going into the Oregon game, and then it could go all downhill from there. Their games are very winnable up to that point. But you look at Michael Penix; he's coming back after a great year. He seems to mold well with the head coach DeBauer and what they do on the offensive side. He was they were connected at Indiana, and that was when Penix was successful. He had a drop off that 1 year at Indiana, but when he transferred over with him to Washington, sometimes the right coach with the right player, it just kind of works out for him. He had 31 touchdowns, 8 INTs last season. Their top 5 wide receivers are back on this one, including 2,000-yard receivers in Rome Odunes and Jalen McMillan. So this group's going to be stronger than ever as far as wide receivers go. But losing Wayne Tula Papa, the transfer that came over from Virginia, he had 6.3 yards per carry last season. It took off a lot of the pressure that Penix had to deal with. They brought in transfers from Arizona and Mississippi State, but I don't know if they're going to match the production in the run game, especially what he brought to the table. I remember him, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think when Wayne got hurt and he wasn't playing in some of those games in positions, I think that offense really struggled without him. So that's going to be something that we have to watch for here with Washington this season. Defensively, there's 8 starters back for them. This is a team that had 37 sacks, 8.9 sack rate last season. They lose their top tackler, but get 5 out of their top 7 back. 3 starters come back, but they lose their best defensive lineman. They replace him with a guy that's a senior, so I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off there. D-backs on this one were ranked 107th versus the pass last season. They lose their number 1 tackler in that group, but they get a solid transfer from Oklahoma State and Jabbar Muhammad, who has playing experience. So we'll see if that really develops that secondary. But they have some tough games at USC, at Oregon State, Utah at home, in that order, by the way. I think it's USC, Utah, and Oregon State. And it's just brutal in October and November for this team. And last season, their 2 losses that they had were by a possession or less, and they lost to Arizona State and UCLA. Championship contenders, sure, but I think there's going to be a slight drop off on the offensive side. We'll see what the defense does. Go ahead,
The
Mike.
defense to me is really like there's one area this defense can improve in that can change the course of their season and possibly, make them a Pac-12 championship. Last year, Washington defense had 12 total turnovers, 5 fumble recoveries, 7 interceptions. For frame of reference, Colorado had 11. So they've got to take the ball away more. They've got to I know it's hard to do. It's hard to just create turnover. Look, USC last year, what did they have? I think they had 3 pick sixes in one game at one point last year.
Yeah.
It's really they led the Pac-12 with 19 interceptions. It's hard to figure out a way to do it more. There are ways to do it. Coaches know how, but if they don't take the ball away more defensively, those are the things that swing games for you. And when you want to win close games, you got to win the turnover battle. If you're not getting turnovers, guess what? You're putting a lot of pressure on your offense not to make turnovers and give it to the other team. So they've got to figure out a way to win the turnover battle more.
You can shadow a bad defense like USC by getting turnovers. And that's what they did last year, and that was a success. I was like, that defense was god-awful altogether, gave up the yaks. But when it came down to the nitty-gritty, they were able to get the turnovers, and with an offense that was virtually perfect, you couldn't stop that offense altogether. And speaking of good offenses, as we go up the board on this one, let's talk about the Ducks. Eugene, Oregon. Dan Lanning in his second season on this one. Yeah, quack. 10 wins last season, 7-2 in the conference, 16 returning starters, 8 on the offense, 8 on the defense. It is looking good for the Ducks here. And they get a favorable schedule, 68th toughest in the country. Over and under on this team, 9.5 wins. A lot of these teams sitting tits up on 9.5. What are your thoughts here on the Ducks, Mark?
Over. Now, I have to go back to they should have had 10 wins last year. That Washington game sucked.
Yeah.
And they absolutely and look, for all intents and purposes, by the time they had gotten Oregon State there, their playoff hopes were over. So it was more of a letdown. Although beating Utah was personal to them. And again, Bo Nix was also injured from that Washington game on. He played, but he certainly wasn't the same guy that he was. Now, Bo Nix is back for his Van Wilder 7th year of college, I think.
Some of these quarterbacks have been there forever. I swear. I think they're all my age.
I mean, literally, it's like these guys are 27 and still playing college football. It's like, hey, grow up. I would say overall, I'm curious how they respond in week 2 against Texas Tech in Lubbock. That's going to be an interesting matchup. I think Oregon wins it. I just don't know I haven't even looked at what the number is. It'll be interesting to see. But for all intents and purposes, this team should be undefeated heading into Salt Lake City to take on Utah October 28th. If they're not, I would argue that their season is done at that point in time. They should be able to beat Washington in Washington. I don't have many reservations there. But they should be at that point in time 7-0 heading into Utah, because then they'll control everything else the rest of the season. Now, here's the other thing to remember about Oregon. As crazy as it may seem, Guns, their offense might actually be able to be better this year than it was last year.
I agree.
That's how nuts it is. This team is going to put up 40 points per game on the regular. The real challenge for Oregon, and Dan Lanning, the former Georgia defensive coordinator, is to get this defense better. Now, Tosh Lupoy, who's their second-year defensive coordinator, came from Bama. So you'd like to think that he's going to have in second year, he's going to have a lot more progression with the defense. They have 8 starters back again. To me, that's really what this thing hedges on. They lost some guys in the NFL draft, obviously, and they should be able to restock here. Oregon had 16 total returning starters. They get USC at home. I think the schedule sets up well for them as long as Bo Nix is healthy. Bucky Irvin is going to be a top 5 running back in the nation when it's all said and done. And I just love everything this team is. They just have to execute and play really well, like to the level that we expect them to, in order to go into Utah, the game that they can't seem to win in Utah, on October 28th at 7-0. If they do that, then like I said, or 8-0 rather. If they do that, they got a shot to beat Utah, and this easily will be a team that is vying for college football playoff contention.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I love Oregon this season, and this is going to be a play for me. I like the over 9.5 on this team altogether. New OC comes in, and he comes from UTSA. If anyone follows me along for the last couple of years, how much I've adored UTSA. I love Sincere McCormick. I loved Frank Harris. I loved everything about that offense and their defense. I think Trailer's doing a tremendous job over there in San Antonio.
The Roadrunners scored like 700 points a game last year. Like, isn't that what they're known for? Like, just playing fast as hell.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, which I find really good, is Trailer has the lock on high school talent in Texas. And he comes from, he has so many connections in that state. He doesn't have to recruit outside of state. And he's able to get kids to buy into the UTSA program. I love that guy so much. And I know that eventually he's going to be going into the P5 coaching. Unless he's one of those guys that I ain't leaving Texas. It's not, everything's good here, unless, a nice Texas job opens up for him. But that's me boasting about a coach on this one. But new OC takes over for them. Will Stein, I like that guy a lot. Bo Nix, inheriting a great offense. You mentioned Bucky Irving, but they also have a good wide receiver in Noah Whittingham. That 1-2 punch back there. They combined both transfers from last year, by the way, into the program. 1,900 rushing yards combined altogether between those two. Plus, you have Bo Nix with mobility. With those 3 in the backfield, who's going to be running the ball? They're going to confuse defenses for sure. Wide receivers on this one, they get their number 1 wide receiver back in Troy Franklin. And they get Troy #1 receiver from last season in Tez Johnson. This guy had 15.1 yards per catch last season. So this is going to be a elite group on the offensive side. I think there's going to be a little bit of drop off on the offensive line, and why I say that, because this team only allowed 5 sacks last season.
But some
Incredible.
of that Guns is just Bo Nix's mobility, right? Like
Fair.
he gets out of his own sacks in a certain way and just takes off and run. Like, again, I'm with your point, but just remember, as long as Bo Nix is healthy and he wasn't at the end of the year on that ankle that he was playing on, there's going to be a measure of he's going to not be able to have to take a lot of sacks.
But in comparing other teams that I've already looked at with mobile quarterbacks, 5 sacks is pretty impressive even with a mobile quarterback. It's insane. Yeah. Plus 5.5 yards per carry they were allowing their rushers get. But with the season, they do lose 4 starters, but they add guys with starting experience from Texas, ECU, and Rhode Island. So plenty of experience there. I think they're going to fill in the voids perfectly. It's not going to be much of a drop off there, but it's tough to match that elite line that they had last season. Defensively, they need to improve on the defensive side on this one. They only had 18 sacks last season, 3.9% sack rate. They lose 3 out of their top 4 tacklers. Defensive line, 3 starters back there, and they get a solid transfer from South Carolina. So I think they're doing their best to improve on putting pressure on the quarterback and stopping the run. Linebackers, they get the #2 tackler back, and they add a transfer, Justin Jacobs from Iowa, and Connor Sewell from Arizona State. These guys have playing experience, so I think this group is going to be a lot better than they were last season. 6 out of their top 8 DBs do return, and they add 4 transfers, so that's going to be a deep unit altogether. I think offensively, no problem. This team's going to be scoring points altogether. The question is on this one with the defense.
Play all their overs.
Yeah, play all their overs on this one. And historically, I want to bring this up here for any head coach that has been an Oregon head coach in their second year. All of them have had tremendous success. The last 3 coaches in their second year, 12-1, 12-2, and 13-2. So keep that in mind here with the trend on this one. Toughest games, 2 revenge games. You mentioned Washington. That's a revenge game. I love playing teams on a revenge. Same thing with Oregon State. They get them at home this season at the end of the year. The Civil War, they used to call it. I don't know what they call it anymore. That's a revenge game for them. They do have to play at Utah. That's going to be a tough one, but they get USC at home. That's going to be a circle game for them on this one. I think this team is a 10-win team, no problem. I love what Oregon's bringing to the table on this one. A lot of experience coming back. Give me the over here, 9.5 wins.
I'm with you. I mean, just break it down objectively. Let's just, for argument's sake, we say the game in Utah is a loss. Okay. Really, the whole season linchpins on playing that game in Washington. Because if they win that game, they can lose to USC and they'll be fine. But if they lose that game, they're going to have to beat USC at home really to make up for it. Like that's where what it boils down to. For my money, I think they'll be able to beat Oregon State at home this year. Even though they lost the game last year, they're just better than Oregon State as long as everybody's healthy. But if October 14th, if they win that game at Washington, they're going over. They don't have to worry about it. As long as they don't make anything drastic and nobody gets seriously injured, Guns, they're good.
Yeah. I think I agree with you on this one. I circled the Utah game as probably their loss, and I think every other game is them in the perfect position to win that game. 2 revenge games, and they get USC at home. They're going to be really pumped up. I love what Oregon's going to bring to the table, and they don't have to play Georgia in week 1, so I like that one too.
That helps.
That helps tremendously on this one. As we go up the board here, last 2 teams we got to break down, and it's going to be the Pac-12 contenders, or actually the teams that were in the championships last year. Utah won the Pac-12 last season, 10-4, 7-2 in the conference, 16 returning starters, 7 on the offense, 9 on the defense. Kyle Whittingham is your coach. Salt Lake City, Utah is the spot. 42nd toughest schedule in the country. Over and under on them, alarming 8.5 wins. Is Utah regressing? Mark, I pass it to you.
I don't know if regressing is the right word. Like, let's put this in context here for a minute. Do you know the last time, Guns, COVID year aside, the last time Utah didn't have 9 wins during the regular season under Kyle Whittingham? 2014. 9 years ago. I mean, just pencil in 9 or more wins. Got it. Done. Go cash your ticket.
Fact.
Look, I stare at this schedule and I get very nervous to bet the over. Why? My first 2 games just suck. Look, they lost the game in Florida last year in week 1. They absolutely should have won that game. Absolutely, 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 because I bet on Utah and laid the 2.5 and absolutely got hosed because Cam Rising threw a bad pick in the end zone that would have won them the game by a field goal. They outplayed Florida in that game. And that was the game, by the way, too, where Anthony Richardson's Heisman stock went from plus 3,000 to plus 250.
Yeah.
In one game. It was insane.
Right.
Then they got to go to Baylor. Our boy CT Betts. I don't like this spot. They got to travel to Cornwallis. The 5th week of the season. They still have to go to USC and to Washington.
Tough.
Oh, God. They have to, of the games I just mentioned, Florida, Baylor, Oregon State, USC, and Washington. That's 5 games right there. They have to go 3-2. Have to.
Yeah, have to.
If they go 2-3, done. They're not hitting the over. That would require them to beat UCLA and Oregon at home, both of them.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I mean, the lucky thing about them is they get Cameron Rising back, right?
Cameron Rising should be back in the Heisman conversation again. Oh, by the way, I would throw a shekel on him to win the Heisman because if everything goes right for them and they win these games, Guns, he's absolutely going to be in that conversation.
Absolutely. I agree with you on this one. But also keep in mind, he's coming off an ACL injury. He tore his ACL in the Rose Bowl. Really brutal on this one. So if he can escape the injury bug during this season, yes, you're correct. This guy is going to be in the Heisman talks. They do lose their top 2 running backs on this one, but they get a talented RB in Jaquin Jackson, who had a great freshman season last year.
I love Jaquindon.
Yeah, Jaquindon, 6.8 yards per carry, this guy. So he's going to have a lot more carries, a lot more touches on this one. They also have a top prospect in Jaden Glover as well. So I think the running back form is going to be in good shape here for the Utes. They do lose their top receiver and tight end, Dalton Kincaid. He goes to the draft. Number 1 tight end taken, by the way, on that one. So they add 3 receivers from the portal from Indiana, Florida State, and Auburn. Losing Kincaid hurts in the passing game. So they do have this prospect tight end, Thomas Yasmin. He's an Aussie. Yeah, he's an all. Yeah. Oh yeah, you fucking. This guy probably can step in and take over.
Remember those commercials? Foster's. Value for beer. Underrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And this guy's going to be tough. I mean, I'm sure he played without a helmet all his career in rugby.
He eats kangaroo. Right? Of course he's going to be tough.
So I think that they're going to be in good hands. We'll see if they can match what Dalton Kincaid brought to the table. Offensive line on this one, 3 returning starters on this one. This is a team that only allowed 15 sacks, 5.4 yards per carry given to their rushers. The replacements are solid, so I think the line is not going to have much of a drop off. Defensively, they had a +6 turnover ratio last season. But when you look at
returning starters, Guns on defense,
9 returning starters. But if you see the splits as far as the defensive production is concerned, they gave up 61.3 pass completion rate, but they only gave 50% at home. Okay, so this team is a home team, toughest place to play, and they're strongest there. They do lose their top corner in Clark Phillips. And their one of their safeties as well, but they have 6 DBs with 5 or more starts under their belt. Plus, they add 2 transfer from P5 schools. I think this is going to be a good unit. So I'll go ahead.
There was only one team last year that was able to run on them, and that was UCLA.
Yeah.
Their run defense is probably the best in the conference. And again, that was a game where DTR went off because I remember I laid the points with UCLA at home in that game. But Zach Charbonnet rushed for almost 200 yards in that game. They were the only team that was able to run on. Utah's generally always been the most physical team in the Pac-12, right? That's always kind of just what we say. So I don't have any doubt they'll be equally as physical, especially up front. I just I don't. That schedule is brutal, man. It's absolutely.
It's
Look, if Kyle Whittingham does it again, you tip your cap to him, and you shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's going to come down to those road games for sure. They do improve on the linebackers. I forgot to mention on this one. They get Stanford's captain on the defense here in Levani I might be getting Damuni. So he's going to be stepping in there at linebacker. He's got plenty of experience and he's a leader. So I think that's going to help that defense out a lot. Um, the, I mean, solid all around, altogether. I think it's just going to come down to those road games at Oregon State, at USC, at Washington, and of course they got Florida in the revenge game at home. So I think they're going to be fine there. But those 3 games in the
I
Pac-12
mean,
on
they're
the road,
laying a big number in week one. What are they laying? 9?
yeah, I
I,
I don't have it in front of me, but I think you're right. I forgot to look at that one.
I don't.
Um,
I don't want to get involved in laying 9 points. I
no,
mean, in week one, look, Billy Napier's offense will definitely not be great this year,
right.
but his defense should be a lot better. That's been his calling card, right? The running game and defense. It's what he won at Louisiana with. So I expect his defense to be a lot better this year. I wouldn't want to lay 9 points against that defense, not in week one.
Yeah, it could come down to like this. I mean, they played a close game last season, so I don't really know. I granted, Anthony Richardson's not there anymore. I don't know if that's going to be, them going to Utah is tough as well. So I don't know about that game. Not on my radar as of yet, but could be. We'll see. We'll see what happens when I study the week 1 slate. But overall, not a game. I mean, seeing them at 8.5, I don't know. Why is that? Why is it sitting at 8.5? If this is a team that has consistently won 9 games or more since 2014, like you said, nothing I'm going to be touching on this one because I just think the competition in the Pac-12 is going to be brutal and 3 tough ass road games. So we'll see what happens with the boys at Utah. Last team to break down here, and we couldn't do it with a better team on this one, the USC Trojans. Dun 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 dun. 11-3 last season, 8-1 in the conference, 17 returning starters, 8 on the offense, 9 on the defense. Lincoln Riley is your coach. Los Angeles, California is the spot. 50th toughest schedule in the country. 9.5 wins is your total. What are your thoughts here on the Trojans, Mark?
Fast forward to October 21st when they host Utah to decide the Pac-12 title game, whether they're in it or not. I mean, that's they'll be 7-0 at that point in time, and I don't really think there's any. Sorry about them walking into South Bend and kicking the crap out of Notre Dame because that's happening. But
Come on now.
I wanted to set you up for that right now. But yeah, that's literally their season, and if they win that, then all they got to do is make a trip up to Autzen Stadium and go beat Oregon, and they will secure a spot in the college football playoff at that point in time. So that's really their schedule sets up very favorably. For the first 7 weeks, I mean, call it the first 6 weeks. I'll give Notre Dame a little bit of, going to South Bend, but San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, Arizona State, Colorado, Arizona. The only question is how much are they going to be laying and what's the total going to be?
Right.
They're going to be easily 2 touchdown favorites in every single one of those games. Easily 2 touchdown, if not 3 touchdown favorites. So how many points do you want to swallow here? Because that's all you're going to eat for the first 6 weeks of the season is points. So yeah, there you go. But yeah, I mean, that's really what it boils down to. There's no reason to believe that this team won't be every bit as good as they were last year. Another team that, if it's possible, they might be better offensively this year than they were last year. They get another transfer at wide receiver, Taj Washington from Memphis, another speedy guy, right? Kind of in that Jordan Addison mold, not necessarily big, but run right down the field and let Caleb Williams throw the ball way down there, and everything should be fine. I don't know. I mean, the running game is interesting to me. How much will they do it? Austin Jones Sr. is now there. He's a guy that I think certainly can be a big part of this offense. Lincoln Riley's never going to abandon the run game completely. So, now that Travis Dye is gone, it's his show altogether. So I think you'll certainly see a heavy dose of him. The real question is, how much better has their defense gotten? It's been a
Right.
real struggle. Alex Grinch, continues to go to the portal, continues to try to stock some talent there. Um, last year they were bad. They should be better this year. 9 starters are back. A lot of those guys from the transfer portal that they got last year should bring them down a lot. And if they can, that's probably the difference between them losing a game to Utah versus beating Utah. And that's ultimately what it boils down to. This is a this team is a college football playoff national title contender at this point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're bringing back a lot of the heartbeat of the offense, especially Heisman Trophy winning Caleb Williams. Um, 42 touchdowns, 5 INTs for him last season. I think he's the favorite again to win the Heisman, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah, I wouldn't make that bet for the record.
no, I wouldn't either. I mean, back-to-back Heisman winners never happen.
Right.
It's so I wouldn't put any bet on that one if you're betting Heisman futures.
Right.
Travis Dye is gone, but they do get South Carolina's leading rusher, Marshawn Lloyd. He comes back, and also they have Austin Jones. 5.2 yards per carry last season, so that group's going to be just fine without Dye in the lineup. Jordan Addison is gone from them on the wide receiver end, but their top 3 other than him are back. Over 600 yards receiving on average from both of them last season, and they get Dorian Singer from Arizona. So good crop of not only veterans, but they also have good recruits as well that we probably don't even know the talent of them. 2 starters back on the O-line. This is a team that allowed 30 sacks last season, 5.8% sack rate. They get 3 transfers to fill in the voids. So hopefully this group does get better as far as putting protection here for Caleb Williams. The defense was weak sauce last season, 5 yards per carry given up on the ground, 63% pass completion rate. But they did, however, get to the quarterback. They had 40 sacks last season. But the D-line is in full rebuild. They do go to the transfer portal, getting guys. This is a unit last season for the D-line that had 20 sacks as a group. So I think there may be some drop-off there as far as putting pressure on, but we'll see what the transfers do. I don't know.
The drop-off here, Guns, more than anything that we have to worry about is the turnovers. Right?
Yeah.
Like the easiest thing to go away. It put them in great position last year to win a lot of games, especially early on when no one really thought a lot of them. Like the game against Oregon State that they snuck out in Cornwallis 17-14. I think they had 4 picks in that game, and 2 of them were in the red zone.
That's right.
So, they lose that game and their season just looks entirely different. But yeah, regardless, the point simply being that those are the hardest thing to duplicate, and they'll need to duplicate it again this year. But this is an offense, again, that's going to average over 45 points a game. They'll be the best offense in the country. And just look out. If their defense is anything like it was last year in the turnover department, they're going to be very, 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 very tough.
And you bring up a good point. They had a plus 22 turnover ratio last season, so that was the benefit of the success.
Duplicate that 2 years in a row. Like that's the real issue.
And it's going to be even tough too because they lose their top corner, shutdown corner, and Blackman. So he's gone. And then they basically went to the transfer portal to fill in the voids. They go get a guy from Arizona, and they also get Traquan Fegans from Bama. So I don't know if that's going to be enough to fill in those voids. They may have a drop off in this one. I guess time will tell. But like you said, the success of that defense is not that they can stop people. It's a matter of them getting the turnovers and creating points for themselves offensively. And that's kind of been the MO for any Lincoln Riley team anyways. It's very Oklahoma-esque in a lot of these cases. But overall with this team, I think the D-backs do have some potential, but they got a lot of work to do. The D-line loses a lot of their strength, their pass rush on this one. That probably created some of those turnovers. Toughest games on the board. They do have to go to South Bend. They do have Utah, and they do have at Oregon. Those are the toughest games on the board, but everything else is pretty much cupcakes for them. So it's going to come down to those 3 games to the season. And, we'll see if Notre Dame with Sam Hartman can really do anything. But usually those teams switch home and home. I don't know. We'll see about this. I know how good USC's offense is. And I don't know. As a fan, I'm just probably going to be turning my phone off and pacing for at least a couple quarters, see if they can stay in the game. But, high hopes to get a revenge game there for Notre Dame. But yeah, contending for a championship, that's probably, this is the favorite to win the Pac-12. This is the favorite to get to the college football playoff. out of this group of Pac-12 teams. And Caleb Williams should have another stellar year under Lincoln Riley. But as far as the over and under in this one, I don't think there's any value here taking them at 9.5. At the road game at Oregon scares me, and Utah seems to be their kryptonite. So it comes down to those two games. And then, of course,
I mean, again, and they get them at home this year. So that
correct.
helps, right? You know, I mean,
that's correct.
They'll get Utah at home, and that hopefully should be the difference for them this year getting a win. I mean, look, the schedule is favorable at the end. It's going to be tough down the stretch. You know, I mean, versus Utah and Washington. I mean, obviously at Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, and then Oregon. I mean, UCLA is going to be a tough game, but I would stipulate that for somehow if at that point in time that they are 10-1 or 11-0, they're not losing a home game to UCLA.
Right. I agree with you on that one. All right. So, we broke it down, folks. All the Pac-12 teams have done. So we got to say, why you beautiful bastards watching us now, watching us later, please like and subscribe to the Sports Wagering Network YouTube channel, and make sure you hit the thumbs up button so we can get this video spread around the goddamn world. We are the sharpest channel on the planet. All together here, folks. Let's get into future picks. Let's break it down to recap for everybody. I'll start with mine. I like the over here on Oregon, 9.5 wins, and you might as well sprinkle a little bit of that on winning the Pac-12 championship as well. I'm sure there's good value there. Also, I like the over 4.5 wins here for the Arizona State Sun Devils. Drew Pine, my former guy, will get it done and get 5 wins. Probably come down to the last game, so I don't like it. I'm not 100% confident. I'm probably 90% though on that one. And then UCLA with Dante Moore over 8.5 wins. I like that one a lot as well. Mark, what do you like for futures here in the Pac-12?
I'm with you on Oregon. We'll take over the 9.5 there. I don't think I have any reservation really about it, but I'm going under with Arizona State, under 4.5 for them. And, you know, even Arizona too, you know, their under to me is also probably a little bit appealing, but officially let's go Oregon over Arizona State under.
Perfect. And Mark, I appreciate you joining us here for the College Football Preview Conference special. Tell the people where they can find you all over the social media zeitgeist.
You look at it right there at Mark Zeno on Twitter and Instagram. Of course, all my plays posted at Sports Memo. And of course, you'll see me across Wager Talk as well, Hustle Show podcast, and the rest of the shows there. So give me a follow, hit me up, let me know what questions you have. I'm here to answer them for you guys. So good luck and go cash some tickets.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we are going to be breaking down the ACC next week, and I'm going to be joined with Adam Trigger on that one. So please join us for that. It's going to be Saturday at 11 a.m., and we are going to just go through the whole entire slate here for the ACC, and then we'll have another show just breaking down the non-P5s. I'm not doing every conference, damn it. I'm going to just give you the teams to look for in the non-P5 on that one. So 2 more shows to go on this one. Then we get into what is going to be a very profitable college football year. If you didn't know what I did last year on that one, bam, 55.4% plus 45 units in 2022 for myself. In the last 3 years, I put up plus 80.2 units, 54.3%, 440, 371, and 7, baby! That's how I do it, baby. But thanks for joining us. Like and subscribe to the channel. Let's cash some tickets, baby. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang.